inputs that we have seen in the data stage job are being represented here, as well as the output file that was also there in the data stage job definition is available here. Now, when we have prepared the flow definition that represents the data stage job that we want to test, we can prepare the test case. Test case is a set of data that we will use for the input as well as expected results for the outputs. Let's give this test case a name and prepare the initial set of data. Let's start from the transactions file. We'll synchronize the columns directly with the data stage job, so we will not need to remember what was the correct name for every field. And let's assume that we will have 3 different transactions, 2 of them for customer 1, 1 for customer 2. The first transaction will be 10 American dollars with VAT rate V01. The second one will be 10 Polish zloty with the same VAT rate. And the third one, again 10 American dollars with the same VAT rate ID. So we have the transactions. Now we need to also prepare the currencies data. Again, we'll fetch the column names automatically. And there were 2 different transactions, 2 different currencies that we have used. One of them was the American dollar, which in order to be calculated to American dollar has to be multiplied by 1. And the second one was Polish zloty. For simplicity, let's assume that it was just a half. The third input is the VAT rate. We have used only one VAT rate ID, V01, for which we need to provide here a multiplier that will calculate the VAT tax. Again, for simplicity of the calculations, let's assume that it's 10%. The final input that we need to prepare is the list of customers. Again, let's fetch the columns from the data stage job definition. And we have used 2 different customer IDs, 1 and 2. Let's assign them to 2 different categories. All of the inputs are ready. Now what we need to do is to tell TestDrive how do we want to verify the output. Let's create the expected output data for the inputs that we have prepared. We had 2 different customer categories. The first customer had 2 different transactions. One of them was 10 American dollars, the second one was 10 Polish zloty, which had the multiplier of 0.5. So the total net value of those transactions should be 15. After adding the tax, it should be 16.5. And there should be just one customer in this category. The second customer had only one transaction, which was worth $10. After adding the tax, it should be $11 in the total value field. And again, there should be just one customer in this category. And this is all that we need to do in order to test the data stage job. What is important is that we have prepared that data in an easy to use form that is good for testers who do not need to think about the particular way of storing data. In this case, the data is being stored in data stage dataset files. It will be really difficult for them to prepare that data in this format or to write handy data stage job that they would need to run for every particular input to transform the data. Instead, they could just use this simple to use user interface or upload data from an Excel file in order to have the data ready to be automatically transformed to the correct input by TestDrive. After running the test, after preparing the test case, now we need to run it in order to check that our data stage job works correctly. Now when we have the inputs defined, we need to provide the expected results for the file generated by the data stage job. Again, we'll fetch the structure of that file automatically from the data stage job, and we need to focus only on the content of the data. So there are two different customer categories that we have used in the sample data. There should be one customer in every category. In the second category, the customer had only one transaction, which was of 10 American dollars value, and after adding the value added tax with rate of 10%, it should have the value of 11 American dollars. The first customer had two different transactions. The first one was 10 American dollars, the second one was 10 Polish zloty, which after translation should be 5 American dollars. So the total net value of $15 after adding the value added tax with rate of 10% should give us 16.5 American dollars. The last thing we need to tell to TestDrive in order to run the test is how to compare the expected results with the actual data. In this case, we want to perform a simple value-to-value comparison with the key field customer category, including all of the columns in the file. Now let's save the test case and run it. As all of the data has been already prepared, the only thing we need to do to run the test is to ask the system to schedule its execution. Now we can go to the executions list and see the progress of executing the test. What is happening right now is all of the input data for the test is being packed, sent to the data stage server, delivered into proper locations in proper formats, doing all of the needed reformatting. The job is being executed, the results are being captured and compared with the expected ones. Once this whole process is finished, the report from the execution is delivered back to the TestDrive server so we can see it within the same user interface which we have used to prepare the test case. After the execution has finished, we can see the results. In addition to the definition of all of the inputs and outputs, the environment variables, the command used to run the job, as well as the data that has been used to populate the inputs, we can also see what were the differences that we have found between the expected results and the actual ones. So for instance, we can see that for both of the categories, the actual value was different than the one that we have expected. In both cases, this value is about 10 or 11 times smaller than the original one, which seems to be similar to the value of the value added tax itself without the net value. Now let's look at the data stage job to see if maybe there is a problem inside a transformer that calculates the gross value. After fetching the VAT rates, we are calculating the gross value here. And indeed, we can notice that the calculation of the total value just multiplies the original value by the VAT rate, while actually it should rather multiply it but 1 plus the rate in order to get the gross value and not the tax itself. After we'll save the graph and compile it, we can run the very same test case again by simply selecting it and scheduling its execution. What is important is that this was the only work that we had to do to run the test that was already prepared. Regression testing using automated solution that allows us to perform those tests automatically is much easier. Let's wait for the test execution to finish and we'll be able to see if the fix that we have just introduced solved the problem. Now the test has passed. As you have seen, we have been able to solve the problem that we have found in the data stage job, rerun the test, and verify that now the result was complete under a minute. This is the time that we would never get when manually preparing all of the inputs and manually doing the output verification. the tests that we have prepared can be easily rerun with a few clicks of a mouse whenever it will be needed. TestDrive can be used for different types of testing. Starting from unit testing, which we have seen a moment ago, where a developer prepares small samples of data to make sure that the data stage job works correctly, through integration testing, where a single TestDrive flow contains multiple data stage jobs or sequences, or scheduler scripts that will run a complex data integration process. Through system testing, where we'll test the complete system by performing large-scale integrations. We can also use it for load and performance testings, where a huge amount of data can be put to the system, and we can also analyze the performance of its processing. Down to the regression testing, where TestDrive really shines, where we can see that the test that we have run 3 or 6 months ago, or maybe even a year ago, can be simply rerun with few clicks of a button. Let's summarize the benefits of using TestDrive for testing data integration processes. First of all, we can reduce the cost of defining the tests. By using user-friendly interface to prepare the flow definition and ability to prepare the test data in a format that is easy to use by the testers without all of the binary details about proper delimiters and proper data locations, they can focus on the most important aspects and prepare tests much more quickly. In the same time, we can increase the value of every single test by defining the test once and executing it forever. This will allow us to reduce the time to user and the total development cost. We can start the testing process very early and make sure that the test that will be prepared at the beginning of the development will be run easily when the development is finished. This will allow us to deliver the data integration process much faster. At the end of the day, we can improve the return of our testing investment dramatically. If you have any more questions about TestDrive, feel free to contact us. We will be happy to provide you with as much information as you will need.